In this video, we will go over the SSIS Integration Toolkit for Salesforce. The Connection Manager is used to establish a connection to Salesforce and is used alongside the source and destination component. To create a Connection Manager in our Integration Services project, we will right-click on the Connection Manager window and select Create New Connection. In the dropdown, we will scroll down to find the Salesforce Connection Manager by Kingswaysoft. In the first page Connection tab, we can set up our general connection settings. The service endpoint allows you to specify the API you want to connect to Salesforce with. We support both SOAP and REST service endpoints. You may select the one that is appropriate for your environment. Our Connection Manager also allows you to specify what Salesforce instance you are connecting to. There are 3 options available: Production, Sandbox, and Other. The service URL is automatically populated by our components when you select the Salesforce instance. However, you can specify an alternate service URL by selecting the other instance type. Underneath the service URL is the service timeout option, which lets you specify the maximum number of seconds the Connection Manager will wait when trying to establish a connection with Salesforce. If a connection is not established within the time, a timeout error may occur. When using the SOAP endpoint, we support the password authentication method. Here, you will enter in your Salesforce username and password, including the security token. If you do not have a security token, you must request one by resetting your security token by logging into salesforce.com. You can test the connection with the Test Connection button to verify if you have access to the instance. For the REST endpoint, we support multiple different authentication types. We support authorization code, certificate, and password. We will go over the authorization code authentication type. With this authentication type, you will need a token file to connect to your Salesforce instance. If you already have a token file, you can click on the ellipsis beside the token path to find the token file and then enter in the token file password. Here we already have a token, so we can select the token file and use it to connect to our Salesforce instance. If you do not have a token file, you can generate a new token file by clicking Get New Token. You can use your own app or the Kingswaysoft app. If you select the Kingswaysoft app, the Connection Manager will use the client ID and secret that is provided by Kingswaysoft. The Kingswaysoft OAuth app is a publicly shared app and is provided so that you can test our software without going through the process of creating an app. However, it is not recommended for any production use, as we cannot guarantee that our app will always be available. For production use, you should create your own app in Salesforce by going to the App Manager and creating an OAuth app. You can then enter your client ID, client secret, and redirect URL, which will be obtained from your newly created app in Salesforce. The 2 options below are the Prevent Cross-Site Request Forgery exploits, which is turned on by default and can be turned off if necessary, and the PKCE Proof Key for Code Extension, which ensures that the client that initiates the OAuth flow is the same client that completes the flow. This option would need to be set in the Salesforce Connected app or as an organization-wide option. After entering in your client ID, secret, and redirect URL, you can click OK. If this is your first time, it will ask you to log into your Salesforce account. However, since we have already logged in before, it has redirected us to our redirect URL. The URL will contain a code. We will copy the entire URL and can paste it into the component. Lastly, you will be prompted to set a password for the token, and the process will be complete. You can then test the connection by using the Test Connection button to verify if you have access to the instance. Then press OK to save the configuration you have created. We will also go over the other authentication types. The certificate authentication type allows us to specify the certificate thumbprint that we have created from our Salesforce app. For this authentication type, you will also need to enter in your client ID and username. If you have not authorized the connected app, you can click the Authorize button and then enter in your redirect URL. You can test the connection with the Test Connection button to verify if you have access to the instance. On the second page, Proxy Server. If you have a proxy on your server, you may include these here, either by auto-detecting a system configured one or manually entering the proxy by entering the server, port, and possibly username and password. The Salesforce password authentication type for REST is similar to the password authentication type for SOAP. However, this time you will need to include the client ID and client secret. After having entered in all our connection information, we can once again click the Test Connection button to test if we have successfully connected to our Salesforce instance. On the third page, we have our additional settings. This is where we can configure additional settings such as allow save on duplicate, allow field truncation, assignment rules, and retry on intermittent errors. When the retry on intermittent errors is enabled, it will allow our component to retry if it detects a brief intermittent error has occurred, and can help in cases where there is an intermittent and temporary outage or disruption of service. To access your credentials for creating an OAuth token in Salesforce, you will need to log into your Salesforce account and search for your App Manager in the Quick Find box. In the App Manager, click on the New Connected App button. Give your app a name and contact email. The name will be displayed in the App Manager. Please ensure that the name is unique within your organization. Next, under the API tab, check the Enable OAuth settings. Make sure that you enter a callback URL. The callback URL is the same as the OAuth redirect URL. After this, you will need to select the OAuth scopes to apply for the app. You can do this by selecting the available OAuth scopes and adding them to the right side. Make sure you are adding the appropriate OAuth scopes, as the OAuth scopes define the permissions that are granted for the app. In this example, we have given full access and perform requests on your behalf at any time. The perform requests on your behalf at any time scope is used to get a refresh token. The refresh token will help you refresh your access automatically, so you don't have to re-authenticate every time. To get your client credentials, you can click the Manage Consumer Details. Once you have the Connection Manager configured, to read data from your Salesforce instance, you can drag and drop the Salesforce source component from the dropdown in the SSIS toolbox into the data flow. When we open the source component, it will take us to the general page. The source component requires a Salesforce connection to connect to the instance. So first, we will select the Salesforce Connection Manager we had just created. The next setting to go over is the batch size. The batch size option allows you to specify how many records you want to retrieve each time. Ideally, you would not want the batch size to be too small to disrupt performance. The next setting is the Include Deleted/Archived option. This option will specify to the component whether or not to return deleted or archived Salesforce records. In our example today, we will leave it unchecked. Next is the Use Bulk API option that allows users to work with large sets of data asynchronously to improve performance. This is done using Salesforce's Bulk API, which is based on REST principles. However, please note this option cannot be used in tandem with the Include Deleted/Archived option. Next, we will specify the source type. There are two options, Object and Object Query. The Object option will allow you to select the object you wish to read from the dropdown. With the Object Query option, you will be using Salesforce Object Query language to query the object you want to read. Using Object Query will allow you to greater customize how you read your object by using joins and filtering criteria. In this example, we will be using the object source type to try to read the leads we have in our Salesforce instance. Here in the source object, we will find the leads object. This can be done by typing the object name, and the dropdown will automatically jump to it. The Refresh Salesforce Metadata button will get the component to retrieve the latest metadata from Salesforce and update each field. There are three options for how to handle the metadata update. Update all. This option would update all the fields regardless of whether there are any metadata changes. Update if there are incompatible metadata. This option would refresh any incompatible metadata to the discovered metadata. Update none. No metadata updates would happen to existing fields. Lastly, we will talk about the output time zone. The output time zone will specify how any datetime values are returned by the source component. There are three options available: time zone of connection user, adjust to UTC, adjust to local system time zone. Lastly, there is the use time zone aware data types, which when selected will return datetime values with the time zone information attached. Once we have the connection manager, source type, source object, and any additional settings configured, the columns page will populate with the Salesforce fields available for the entity. In the Find text box, you can filter to find a specific field or number of fields. In the columns page, the first column allows you to control which fields are sent for the downstream path. You can do this by selecting or unselecting specific fields. The topmost checkbox will either select or deselect all fields. The second column that we see is the name of the field. The third column is the data type that is associated with the Salesforce field. The Hide Unselected Fields allows you to quickly look at only the selected fields. Now we have finished configuring our Salesforce source component, and you can click the OK button to save your configuration. You can now connect the source component to a transformation or destination component to pass the data downstream. When working with the Salesforce destination component, we will begin with some sample data that we can use to write to our Salesforce environment. We can drag and drop our Salesforce destination to the data flow and connect our source to the destination. When we open the Salesforce destination component, it will take us to the general page. Similar to the source component, the Salesforce destination component will require a Salesforce connection to connect to the instance. So first, we will select the Salesforce connection manager that we have originally created. The next option is the batch size. This option will specify how many records to write to the Salesforce with a single service call. Next, we will select the action to perform. We have 7 actions available with our Salesforce destination component. Create, which creates new records in Salesforce. Update, which updates existing records in Salesforce. Delete, which deletes records from Salesforce. Upsert, which will update any existing records in Salesforce if a matching record is found. Otherwise, it will create a new record. When the upsert action is selected, you will need to provide an upsert external ID field. Merge, which will perform a Salesforce merge action by retaining the master record and deleting other records. The merge action is only possible on a select number of Salesforce objects. Hard delete, which will permanently delete records from Salesforce when Bulk API is enabled. Undelete, which will undelete records from the recycling bin. Next, we will select the destination object. The destination object will specify which Salesforce object to write the data to. In this example, we want to import new leads into Salesforce, so we will set the destination object to leads. Similar to the source component, you can type in the object name to jump to that object. The Use Bulk API option will allow you to use the Salesforce Bulk API when writing to your Salesforce instance. When using Bulk API, your data is processed asynchronously, which will provide additional performance. When using REST as the service endpoint for your connection manager, the only option under the Bulk API section you can change is whether to use Bulk API or not. The grayed out options are handled by the service, so you will not be able to change them. However, with SOAP, you will have more control. When using a Salesforce connection manager with SOAP as a service endpoint, you can set some of the Bulk API options in the component. The bulk data format allows you to choose the file format which aids the bulk job and the bulk action. We currently have 4 options, however, zip CSV is recommended. The concurrency mode is the mode for which the batch file will be processed. We have 2 options, parallel or serial. When working with Bulk API enabled and no default output connected to the Salesforce destination, you will receive the full benefits of the reduction in processing time. However, you will not receive feedback for if the action is complete. You would need to use a job ID variable to later verify the job status. However, if you connect the destination to a downstream component, the component will wait for the job to complete and will provide the job status. Lastly, we will go over the optional settings. First is the remove invalid characters, which will remove any invalid characters from the input. These invalid characters may cause an XML exception and are usually not accepted by Salesforce in the first place. Next is the ignore null value fields. By selecting this option, any null values will not be posted to the Salesforce instance. This can help avoid situations where you overwrite non-empty values in Salesforce with an empty value. Next, we have the send datetime values in UTC format. If this option is left unchecked, any datetime values passed into Salesforce will be treated as the integration user's local time. Next, we have the send empty string as null values. When enabled, the option will convert any empty strings to null. We will also go over the additional buttons on the bottom of our component. When you click the refresh metadata button, the component will perform the following 3 actions. Update any existing object fields, add any new object fields that have recently been created, and remove any object fields that have recently been deleted from Salesforce. The Map Unmapped Fields button will map any unmapped Salesforce fields by matching their names with the input columns from the upstream component. The Clear All Mappings button will reset all your mappings. The Expression FX button will launch SSIS Expression Editor to enable you to dynamically set properties. The Generate Documentation button will generate a Word document that describes the component's metadata, including any relevant mappings and other information. The Salesforce Destination Columns page is where you will be mapping the input columns to your destination fields. The Columns page has 6 columns. From left to right, we have Input Column, Destination Field, Text Lookup, Pick List Mapping, Data Type, Unmap. Input column lets you select which column from the upstream component to write to the corresponding Salesforce field. The destination field is the field that the input column will be writing to. The text lookup column is only available for Salesforce lookup fields. If the feature is available and is selected, it allows the component to perform a lookup based on the target text or integer field of the target object. The pick list mapping column is only available for Salesforce pick list fields. If the feature is available and is selected, it allows the component to translate the input values into the pick list values which are part of their Salesforce instance. The data type column shows the Salesforce's field's data type. Lastly, the unmap column is used to unmap the input column from the destination field. However, if there's no columns mapped to the destination field, it can be used to map the upstream input column to the destination field by matching the name. If the text lookup feature is available, you can perform lookups based on the text value of the target object. To configure the feature, you can click on the ellipsis button in the text lookup column. You can then check the Use Text Lookup option, which will provide you with a list of target objects for the lookup field. The target object column contains the name of the object you are performing the lookup on. The opt-out column will exclude the lookup object from being used for text lookup. The target text/integer field is the field from the target object that is used for the lookup. It is the field that gets matched with the input field you are passing in. Our text lookup also supports a secondary lookup field. You may specify a different input column and target field. Lastly, our optional default value column, when specified, is the default value that is used if the lookup is to fail. Our text lookup also supports additional advanced options, such as ignore case, report error on duplicates, write null on empty values, and skip record if lookup fails. For our text lookup feature to work efficiently, we use an internal cache when the lookup is requested. You can choose between 2 different cache strategies. Full cache, which will populate a full cache of all the records from the lookup object before the lookup. This is the preferred option when the number of records in the lookup object is relatively small. Or partial cache, which will gradually build up the lookup cache as the data load progresses. This is the preferred option when the number of records in the lookup is significantly large. After you have configured everything, you can click OK and the text lookup column should now show yes. The picklist mapping feature allows you to specify how you map your input value to a picklist field. Similar to the text lookup option, to configure the feature, you can click on the ellipsis button in the picklist mapping column. The plus and X button will allow you to add or delete mapping entries. The import button allows you to import from a mapping that you have previously saved or exported. The export button allows you to export all mapping values in the grid to an XML file so that edits can be made using a different tool that you may feel more comfortable with. The input value column allows you to specify the input value that will be translated to the picklist option value. On the bottom, we have handling of non-matched values, which will tell the component how to handle any values that are not part of the mapping entries. There are 4 options. Create option, which will let you create a new option as well as specify the label value. Replace as an existing option, which will let you set an existing option value to be used as the default replacement value. Set as null, which will set the value as null. And raise an error. This will throw an exception and fail the component entirely. After you have configured the picklist value mapping, you can click OK and the picklist mapping column should show yes. Finally, the error handling page is used to specify how errors should be handled if they occur. Our component has three options for handling errors: fail on error, redirect rows to error output, ignore error. If fail on error is selected, the component will fail on the first error that occurs. If redirect rows to error output is selected, the component will not fail if any error occurs. Instead, any record that fails will be passed to the error output, while any successful records will still be passed down to the default output. The error output will then show the error code, the column name, and the error message of the record that failed. The error output can be written to a database or any destination component for additional logging. The last option is ignore error, which will fully ignore any errors that occur. Please note that the error will still occur, however the component will not fail and you will not receive any error messages. Lastly, on the error handling page, we have the option to enable additional output fields from the destination component. These fields can be used for any additional logging. Salesforce Record ID is the record ID of any newly created records. IsNew will indicate whether the record is a newly created Salesforce record or an existing one. This can be useful when you are using the upsert action. Updated record ID is only available when you are using the merge action. This should contain the updated related IDs of those merged records. Lastly, there's the option to enable skip rows output. This option will show any rows that have been skipped. Finally, we will go over the Salesforce command task. The Salesforce command task is a control flow component, which is different from the other components we have went over in the video. The Salesforce command task is used on the control flow instead of the data flow. The Salesforce command task is used to run Apex commands to Salesforce for any integration requirements. We will first drag and drop the command task into our control flow. When we open up the command task component, it will take us to the general page. Similar to the source and destination components, to use the command task, you will need a Salesforce connection to connect to the Salesforce instance. We will select the Salesforce connection manager that we have created earlier. To use the command task, we will set up the Apex command that we want to run. Here is a sample command you can use. Our Salesforce command task also supports the use of user and system variables. For this video, we have put an Apex command into a variable. We can now click on the Insert Variables button on the panel, and the placeholder value will be inserted into the text. Lastly, you can click on the Expressions FX button to launch SSIS Expressions Editor to enable you to dynamically set properties. On the second page of the Salesforce command task is the error handling. The error handling page is used to specify how errors should be handled if they occur. Our component has three options for handling errors: fail on error, write error to variable, ignore error. If fail on error is selected, the component will fail on the first error that occurs. If write error to variables is selected, the component will not fail if any error occurs. Instead, the component will pass the error to a variable. You can choose the variable you want the component to write to, or you can create a new variable to write to. The last option is ignore error, which will fully ignore any errors that occur. Please note that the error will still occur, however the component will not fail and you will not receive any error messages. We hope this video has helped you understand our SSIS integration toolkit for Salesforce. Kingsway Soft. Integration made easy.